Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates.
Hello everyone and welcome to Daily News Simplified, your one-stop solution to detailed analysis of current affairs which are published in the Delhi edition of Hindu newspaper and are equally relevant for your UPSC preparation. Articles dated 11th of December 2021 are listed on your screen, and the timestamping for these articles is already given in the description box. So let us begin with the first article for the day. The first article for today's discussion was published on page 1st of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper. As per this article, one of the Member of Parliament with the name Badruddin Ajmal has questioned the central government about its proposal on the sedition law, that is section 124 of Indian Penal Act. If we go through this article, we'll find that there are a number of controversies which are attached to this sedition law, and there are numerous activities which have been happening in the past 10 years as far as a debate between sedition law and right to speech and expression is concerned. The context of the article says that central government has denied to scrap the section 124 of Indian Penal Code that deals with this sedition. Sedition means inciting people to raise voice or to act against the state or the authority. Government has argued in order to say that they are not going to scrap this law, and they say that this is a question of law and this section is pending for adjudication with the Supreme Court. And when some matter is at the adjudication of Supreme Court, it is less likely to be discussed in the question hour of Parliament. The relevance of this topic of sedition is relevant for your General Studies paper 2, and this could be asked in various forms under these three categories. The topic of sedition is relevant for your General Studies paper 2 and could be asked under different categories such as functions and responsibility of the union government, separation of power between judiciary and the executive, and also the issues related to the dispute redressal mechanism. It is also important as far as functioning of the executive in the country is concerned, and that is the relevance of this article. This could also be asked under the different aspect of Indian Constitution related to freedom of speech and expression. So the content for today's article would be, we will read about the article foremost, and then we will discuss about the sedition as the entire act. Then we will learn about the Sedition Act under 124A of Indian Penal Code. We will also look into the freedom of speech and expression and its debate with reasonable restriction. We will also conduct a small debate between whether sedition should be scrapped altogether or it should be continued but in different format. And lastly, we will look into some of the way forwards in this regard. And after this entire discussion, I will give an important mains related question for you to practice on daily basis. As far as this article is concerned, well, in July 15 this year, Supreme Court has said that sedition law belongs to the colonial era. As you know that this law was brought into practice by the British imperialist in 19th century, and because of this law was adopted by India itself because India is following the Indian Penal Code based on the Macaulay Committee, which has drafted the basic concept of these laws. And on this judgment, Supreme Court has questioned the central government whether is it necessary even after the 75 years of independence to carry on with the same law that Britishers themselves are not following. The reason which was given by the Supreme Court is that the sedition law is subjected to gross misuse, and this misuse is related to the fundamental right of free speech and liberty. And because of this judgment, one of the parliamentarian has questioned the government yesterday regarding its response to the judgment which was given by the Supreme Court. If you go through the basic provision of section 124A of Indian Penal Code, which talks about the sedition? Well, it is formulated in this manner. The section says that whoever, that is any person, through, that is by, words, any sign, any visible representation or otherwise. The last point, otherwise, is open to misinterpretation also. So, any person utilizing these four categories or any one of these medium goes to bring or attempts to bring hatred or contempt or excite disaffection towards the government established by law. It means if a person goes in criticizing or exciting the disaffection against the illegitimate government of the day, that is not amounted to sedition. So let's say there is a particular area in the country where left-wing extremism or there is any revolutionary ideology is going on and some of the people has created a parallel government. If any person goes or excite disaffection against this parallel government, that is not amounted to the sedition. Sedition is only amounted if these acts are amounted against the government which is established by law. And here law simply means law which is guided by the Constitution of India. However, if a person try to comment anywhere through word, sign, visual representation or otherwise to bring or to obtain any alteration in the government acts, and that too in a lawful manner. You all know that recently farmers have gave up their protest against the 3 farm laws. These farmers were trying to obtain the alteration in the government act but in a lawful mean. And that is the reason why these farmers were not charged against the sedition. The same is true when some person comment on the administrative or other actions of the government without attempting to excite hatred, contempt or dissatisfaction. It simply means that a person who is writing, let's say, an editorial in the Hindu newspaper try to criticize the government of the day in lawful manner. That person will not be held liable under sedition. And these are the exemptions which has kept the sanctity of this law and also provide ample avenue for the government to defend this law in the court of law. Well, these are some of the important recent examples of the sedition cases, and they have also been criticized on international and the national platform. Supreme Court under Ramesh Thapar versus State of Madras has said that until and unless freedom of speech and expression threatens the security of or tend to overthrow the state, it is not subjected to the sedition. So if any person today speak out on, let's say, social media or speak out on, let's say, print media, anything which does not jeopardize the security of India, that is not amounted to sedition. Similarly, under the Kedarnath Singh case versus State of Bihar in 1962, this is the landmark judgment as far as sedition is concerned. And as you know, UPSC can ask these kind of acts in the mains examination also because they have already done so previously. Under this case, Supreme Court has ruled that section 124A of sedition is constitutionally valid. And this validity was given on the ground that the government of the day is established by law. So it is not an illegitimate or illegal government. Hence, that should be respected. They have also struck a kind of a balance between the right to freedom of speech and expression and the power of legislation to restrict it. The landmark judgment under this case was this, where it has tried to create a balance, saying that sedition is not all bad because it provides the avenue to the government to restrict the illegal activities against the government as well as the people of the country. On the other hand, it also provides the legislation a right to restrict the misuse of freedom of speech and expression. However, in the same judgment, Supreme Court has limited the scope of this section and said that if anyone try to incite imminent violence to overthrow the state, that person should be booked under this law. And here government does not only mean the Prime Minister, Chief Minister or maybe the Council of Ministers. It also includes the permanent executive and the other institution. So let's say tomorrow a group of people try to identify Election Commission of India to be illegitimate and raise voices in the social media to create violence against the Election Commission. In that manner, government can utilize this act to go against those perpetrators. Now, why do we need freedom of speech and expression? Now, this is important not only from the perspective of sedition, but from the perspective of fundamental rights in general. So, read all these points carefully. Well, freedom of speech and expression provides the attainment of self-fulfillment to a single citizen of the country. It assists in discovery of truth. In a democracy, every citizen should have right to ask for truth because the power of the government is derived from the people who are governed. They are the citizen, so they should know the truth. RTI is based on this principle only. It strengthens the capacity of a person to take informed decision. So until and unless you know what government is doing, how a government is doing, what is the structure of the government, you will not be able to make an informed citizen when it comes to the voting or casting vote in the election. It allows to achieve democratic means of protest. It also empowers us to reject the government policy, as we have seen in the case of farmers' protest against the 3 farm laws. It excels oneself in its ideology. So let's say today some people support the ideology of communism or the ideology of socialism. So the freedom of speech and expression given under Article 19(1) of the Indian Constitution provide themselves to excel in their own ideology and thinking. This freedom brings accountability of the executive to the citizens of the country. But then the real question is why we have issues related to freedom of speech and expression. Well, the point is we need to differentiate between what is this actual freedom talks about. Because whenever we talk about freedom of speech and expression, there is no legitimate boundary which can be laid down. As this is a matter of quality, as this is a matter of human endeavor, we do not have any sort of legitimate boundary or frontier which we can draw in order to differentiate between the freedom enjoyed by the citizen of the country and what reasonable restrictions can be put on those citizens. And that is the reason why there is an issue which arises. Once a person goes beyond these reasonable restrictions, it is likely to avail the sections or the imposition of 124A under IPC. As far as freedom of speech and expression is concerned, so you must have read the Article 19(1) of the Indian Constitution, which provides the freedom of speech and expression to all the subjects in the country, but this is subjected to the reasonable restrictions. As you know, Article 19 is available only to the Indian citizens. These reasonable restrictions include the interest and the sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, friendly relations with the foreign states, public order, decency or morality. And morality is the one point where most number of seditions have been charged. And lastly, reasonable restrictions are related to contempt of court, defamation and incitement of an office. Sedition is least utilized as far as friendly relation to the foreign states in India are concerned. If you go on the debate on sedition, that whether it should be scrapped or whether it should be stayed here for long. If we go by the scrapping of sedition, we'll look that We will argue that it goes against the democratic value because democracy means when people enjoy all rights equally without unwanted restrictions. Sedition also provides an ample avenue to the state to implement law and order in ill-equipped manner. Most of the police departments across the states are not well equipped to have sensitization towards what people are speaking against the government. Sedition is open to gross misuse by the public authorities, hence it should be scrapped. It is nothing but a draconian nature of punishment, like imprisonment for 3 years. That kind of punishment for speaking truth or that kind of imprisonment for speaking in a free choice of humankind is draconian law. And most of the time, this law is used to silence print media or journal media. And all these arguments are given by the experts in order to remove the sedition law from the country. But on the other hand, pro-government people, and in fact, the government itself has given these many arguments to support the continuation of this law. Supreme Court under its judgment has said that this law is not draconian. However, its use is draconian. It is guided under the Article 19(2) of reasonable restrictions. Hence, government is all legalized to implement these kind of laws to prevent the law and order crisis. It does not restrict all speech and expression, like we have seen in the exemptions which are given to all the citizens in the country to perform their speech and expression. Such kind of provisions are required to curb the anti-national forces, including your left-wing extremism, terrorism, or in fact the insurgency in the northeast. And lastly, a legal expert have argued that if any law is misused, that does not mean that we have to repeal that law. If anything is misused, we should go for reforming that law in letter and spirit which meet the requirement of the day. The way forward which is required as far as sedition is concerned are these. We have to go by the judgments given by the Supreme Court under Kedarnath or any other law in this relation. For instance, the judgment given in Kanhaiya Kumar case. We also need to sensitize the law enforcement agencies, including the police departments. We need to depoliticize the security forces which are under the extreme pressure to take sedition as a route to meet the political aspirations of the day. We also need to go for penal provisions against the misuse given to this law. And lastly, we also need to sensitize the general public that they should practice their freedom of expression and speech, but in the dignity of the nation and towards the maintenance of law and order in the country. With this discussion in place, now I will leave you with this practice question. This question says, do you agree that freedom of speech and expression is limited in India? So you have to argue with yes or no. You have general point on both these arguments. So analyze this statement or this debate with respect to sedition law in the country, that is 124A of IPC. This answer should be written under 250 words. With this, now we move to the next article for the day. This article related to the goods and service tax was published on page 6 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and provides very important insights to the analysis of goods and service tax in India. Hence, it is no question that you can skip this article today. And we have provided the ample analysis of this article in today's DNS. The context of this article says that GST or goods and service tax is still struggling with outstanding issues that needs to be resolved in order to avail all the benefits of this one nation, one tax regime. As you must be aware that it was the month of July 2017 when goods and service tax was launched in entirety in the country. And this act has provided three regimes such as central GST, state GST and integrated GST model. This GST model has been criticized on multiple fronts, which is actually the part of this article today. And this article has also provided some of the international comparisons and best practices which you can utilize in order to write good points in your mains examination in the future. The relevance of this article comes from the fact that GST could be asked or any of its important provision could be asked in the prelim examination with general consideration of indirect tax structure in the country. Under GS paper 3, that is the component of Indian economy, we have issues related to the mobilization of resources, and here GST could be asked. It could also be asked on the part of revenue sections under government budgeting in the same paper. Content for this article would include the issues which are plaguing as per the article and as per these authors under the GST, international best practices. We'll also look into the basics of goods and service tax, and we'll lastly go into one practice question. As far as unresolved issues are concerned, well, these are the issues which have been mentioned by these authors in this article. The first issue is the exclusion of essentials. Essential here simply means the products such as electricity, goods which are having very high forward and backward linkages such as petroleum products are also excluded from GST. You must have read these two important points multiple times, but the points which are going to be there next are very important and could provide you ample insight into the GST analysis and can help you to fetch more marks in the mains examination. Well, because of the rolling out of the GST, in the last 4 years, what we have observed is that the tax to GDP ratio, it simply means that the total tax revenues generated in an economy divided by the particular GDP of that place. It could be the state GDP also. So tax to GDP ratio of many states in the country has reduced in the past 4 years after the rolling out of GST. As far as revenue growth is concerned, it simply means that GST which is covered or which is collected in the form of indirect tax revenue over and above the GDP of a particular state is at what position. So revenue growth or the growth of revenue under GST is 6% for the center, but it is only 4.5% to the state, which means the states are now going through negative returns under the GST regime. And this has gone against what states were having previously or under the value added tax regime prior to the rolling out of GST. As far as revenue neutral rates are concerned, well, when it comes to the producing states, it is at the lower level. And when it comes to the consumer state, they are getting all benefits of revenue neutral rates. As GST is a consumption based, destination based, one nation, one taxation. If I have to give one example of the producer state, I will give you the example of, let's say, Jharkhand. Now, Jharkhand is a state where steel is being produced, but if I give you the example of consumer state, let us take the example of Maharashtra. So, Maharashtra is known for industrial growth. Now, this steel is getting transferred from Jharkhand to Maharashtra, and Maharashtra being the consumer state is getting benefit of GST more than what Jharkhand is actually getting. Writers have also criticized the rolling out of GST and its timing because the year 2017 was not the best year as far as economic reforms or its rolling out is concerned. As you know, since 2018, we have been going through the dismal economic growth, and in 2020, after the rolling out of global pandemic of COVID-19, it has been dismal. Irregularity of GST compensation payout to the state has also remained another issue and also a matter of concern. Because of the lower revenues due to COVID-19 pandemic, central government was incapable to roll out the packages or the compensation under GST Compensation Act 2017 to the states on time. And lastly, the data which is collected by Goods and Service Tax Network is not being shared by any other authority. And this has created, according to the author, a sense of data monopoly in the country, and this should be avoided at all possible points. As far as international best practices are concerned, well, we can write these kind of practices in the mains examination. Canada model shows that they have provided the limiting factor, or they have reduced the over reliance on zero rating, that is no taxation, tax exemptions, that is keeping some goods out of the bracket of taxation, and they have also harmonized the tax rates in the country. Brazilian model has shown that they have incorporated more expenditure on the social security such as health and education. They've also increased the provision of subsidy instead of providing exemptions under the taxation. And lastly, if we go by the Malaysian model, well, their information technology structure as far as input tax credit and its collection is concerned, it is flawless. So India can adopt these kind of international practices in order to have better understanding and to have better outcomes of GST regime. After this discussion, we shall move towards the basic understanding of the GST in general.
So what is GST, or what GST is all about? GST is a unified and all India. These are the two keywords. Unified simply means that there is just one taxation across the nation. Take this for example. You want to go in a party in a fancy restaurant. It is a restaurant which is air conditioned. The taxation on the air conditioned restaurant, let's say, is 18%. So the GST charged on the services and the food you eat is 18%. Now, whether this restaurant is situated in Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, or maybe in northeastern states does not matter. If it is 18%, it is unified and it will be 18% across the nation. GST is an indirect tax. It simply means the payer of the taxation or the payer of the tax is not the actual person who is bearing the burden. The one on whom the tax is imposed can shift it to the other. Take for example, the product which you are buying in the market and the tax you are paying. The burden of the tax is on you and not the seller or the shopkeeper. Shopkeeper has already paid the tax and he has shifted the burden of the tax on you. Why you? Because you are actually consuming the product. The shopkeeper is not consuming the product, so he will not bear any kind of burden. So, indirect tax simply means when there is a shift in the taxation and the burden to the final consumer. That is the indirect tax. GST was imposed in July 2017 after a very long deliberations and conversations in the Parliament of India. As it is a part of the federal system and it is also part of the economic matter including the taxation, it was undertaken through a constitutional amendment and multiple amendments were included and a separate GST Act was passed. GST is a comprehensive, multi-stage, destination-based tax that is levied on every value addition. Now, what is value addition? Let us understand through the whiteboard. Now, what is value addition? Value addition simply means when you are adding a separate value, and value here means monetary value, not the physical value. When you add a certain value to a product and you charges extra money over it, that is known as the value addition. Assume that you are a manufacturer and you make a product rupees 100. All right. Now, when you make this product rupee 100, the cost of production in manufacturing this 100 rupee was also 100. So if you sell this product at this price, what you are going to gain? Zero. Your profit will be zero. So what you will do, you will add a certain margin to it. What that margin is? That margin is your hard work which you have paid in manufacturing this product. The cost which you have incurred include the cost of electricity, labor, raw material, or could be anything extra. However, you have already added your margin into it, and together this you will make out a price, let's say 120 rupees. This extra 20 is nothing but the value addition in the product. This 20 rupees is the price which you have added in the product in order to make it a more value added good. If we take the example of bread, which is the very classic example, if you are running a bakery and you have bought flour wheat flour, you have labor, you have all the machineries, you have that burner and everything else. Now what you have done, combining all those things, you have made out a product which is a bread. So what you have done, you have transported raw material from a wheat flour to a bread. That means you have added something extra to it. And that something extra will add up into the price as well. So government will not take price or the taxation on this. They will take the taxation on the value addition of 20 rupees. So after that, at every stage, including the transportation, wholesaler, retailer and consumer. So at every stage, there will be a kind of value addition. So this 100 rupees will never be counted, only the value addition at every different stages will be counted. And this value addition will be undertaken for your final determination of the GST. Now coming back to the article, the GST has removed the cascading effect. Now what is cascading effect? It is nothing but the removal of multiple counting or double counting of the same product. Now understand the cascading effect in the following example. Assume that the manufacturer has cost a product 100 rupees. The wholesaler has cost the same product as 130, the retailer at 150, and the final price of the product turn out to be 160 in the market. Now at every stage you can see that there is addition of some kind of value to the actual price. So the earlier regime was the VAT or value added tax, and that tax was actually imposed on the final price. And this final price actually included the intermediary prices as well. So what government has done through the GST, that they have reduced or they have removed the cascading effect of multiple counting of the same product. And now what they have done, they are just counting the value addition, and the tax is imposed on the value addition to a product. Now you can see in this example that the difference between both these value is evident, and that is the reason why GST is assumed to be much more simpler than the value added tax. The multi-stage under GST simply means an item goes through multiple change of hands, as I said, from manufacturer to the wholesaler to the retailer, then to the consumer, and along its supply chain. So where it happens, the entire process goes on under the supply chain. These stages include the purchase of raw material, the production or the manufacture of product, warehousing of the finished good, which also include the transportation cost, selling to the wholesaler, sale to the product to the retailer, the shopkeeper, where you visit. You do not buy product from the wholesaler, you buy it from the retailers. And finally selling to the end consumer. Now all of these stages are called the multi-stage under the GST. So the current GST is levied on all these stages, but only on the value addition and not the cost. As you can see, the GST is levied on the value addition, that is only the monetary value, not the actual addition in the cost. So this monetary value is added at each stage to achieve the final sale to the end consumer, as we have seen here at the 60. And finally, there is another keyword which is known as destination based tax. Destination based tax simply means the tax will be imposed where the final consumption of the good is taking place. It is also known as consumption based tax. I have also listed down an example. Consider this, that the goods are manufactured in Maharashtra and sold to the final consumer in Karnataka. Since goods and service tax is levied at the point of consumption, the entire tax revenue will go to Karnataka and not Maharashtra. Now why this happens? Because ultimately who is benefiting? The beneficiary in this case are the consumers of Karnataka. So the consumer of Karnataka are beneficiaries, then why not the government of Karnataka take the tax? Take the reverse example. If the same thing is happening and people of Karnataka are consuming the goods, but the taxation money is going in the Maharashtra, so who will benefit? The producer of Maharashtra, the government of Maharashtra, and who will lose? The consumers and the government of Karnataka. And this is the reason why it is a destination or the consumption based taxation. Going by the components of GST. Well, there are three basic components of GST: CGST, SGST, and IGST. It is nothing but central, state, and integrated. Now, what is central GST? It is a tax collected by central government on the intra-state sale, example transaction happening in Maharashtra. The second is the tax collected by the state government on intra-state. The keyword here is intra or within the state. Example, the transaction happening within Maharashtra. So both first and the second are the same. Position is same, example is same, only the tax collecting agency is different. On the other hand, the integrated GST is a tax collected by the central government. Now this is a keyword. So IGST is collected by the central government from an interstate. Now interstate means between the state. As we have seen the example of Maharashtra and Karnataka, here you can also see the example of Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. The tax structure under the new GST is as follows. When a product is sold within a particular state, now what does the new regime says? The new regime says that there will be two authorities or two kind of tax, that is CGST and SGST. What was the earlier stance? Earlier stance was value added tax and the central excise or service tax. Now, what is the current distribution model? The revenue will be shared equally between the center and the state. So, if a car is manufactured in the state of Haryana, the GST on that car will be shared between government of Haryana and the government of India. On the other hand, when there is a sale to the another state, what is the current status? It will be covered under integrated GST. Earlier the instance was that central sales tax and excise together were taken. Now, how the revenue is distributed? There will be only one type of tax, that is the central, because central is the only authority which is covering up the tax in this case. So central will distribute or share the IGST revenue based on the destination of that good. So if good is arriving to Karnataka, central government will cover the taxation and will share it with the state of Karnataka. Following are the taxes which are replaced by GST. Although we have covered this on multiple instances in the previous video also, so I am just going to take up as a revision. First is the central excise duty. What is excise duty? Excise duty is the tax which is imposed on a product when it leaves the production unit. So when the product comes out of a factory, the first taxation imposed on that product is the excise or the excise duty. Then there are duties of excise, then there are additional duties on excise, additional duties of customs. Customs is nothing but export and import duties. Then there is special additional duty of custom. We have cess, we have state VAT, which are also under the GST now. We have central sales tax, we have purchase tax, we have luxury tax, entertainment tax, entry tax, taxes on advertisements, and taxes on lottery, betting and gambling. All these are now replaced by the GST. Then comes the another bouncer. I would say bouncer because these are the areas where UPSC can play with you in order to get you confused. Now these are the goods and services which are not covered under the GST. Take for example, the voluntary services or the services given by the NGOs. These are also the services, they are helping the humanity, they are helping the human race. However, these services are not taxed. Another example is the services provided by the religious institutions. If you have read your beloved M. Lakshmikant, you must have been aware of the fact that institutional which are run by the religious purposes or the temples, mosques, churches are not taxed in India under the fundamental rights. However, certain fines, penalties, certain fees can be imposed on that. However, that is a different matter altogether. But these are the certain kind of services which are excluded from the GST. On the other hand, if we talk about the goods including the live fish which is captured by the fisherman across India, fresh fishes, fresh milk, okay, ginger, garlic, these are the many other goods which are excluded or not included in the GST. Supplies that attract nil rate of taxation or the 0% of taxation include cereals, fresh fruits and vegetables which you buy every day from the groceries. Those vegetables and fruits are not taxed under GST. Natural honey, salt and other things. And lastly, we have, along with the above, the petroleum or the crude petroleum, high-speed diesel, petrol, natural gas, aviation turbine fuel, and finally the electricity and alcohol are excluded from the GST. Now, before concluding this discussion, I want to give you an important difference between 0% taxation and complete exclusion. Now, petroleum and alcohol is completely excluded from the GST. On the other hand, there are certain items on which there is 0% taxation. At the end of the time, as a consumer, you must be thinking that the both are same. Excluded from GST means that taxation is there, but this taxation is not as per the rules of GST. For example, the petrol prices in Rajasthan or the petrol prices in Odisha are different because they are out of the GST. Taxation is there, but it is different. It is not unified under the GST. On the other hand, 0% taxation means they are under the GST, but taxation is zero. So the product is paid or the product is bought without any taxation. So if you are buying salt from the market and you see that there is 0% taxation on this, it means it is under the GST, but government is not taking any money. On the other hand, petroleum or the alcohol things are outside the GST, but the government is taking tax on that. And lastly, who is exempted from the GST? All those businesses which have turnover up to 20 lakh, that is below 20 lakh, are exempted from the GST registration. So the barber who is sitting under the tree, the cobbler, or the one who is providing the rickshaw services, they are exempted from GST.
Now, as we have talked about, this is the practice question which is attached to the article. Critically evaluates the performance of goods and service tax on its objective of being one nation, one tax reforms. Now, this question is asking about the performance of goods and service tax only with respect to its objective of bringing one nation, one tax reforms in the country. So, try to write this question in only this context and nothing else. You have ample discussion and material which we have already provided in this article. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article was published on page 12 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper, where it has talked about the recent index of industrial production, its growth, and the dismal performance in the second month in a row. As per this article, index of industrial production has increased by 3.2% in October. And this is mainly because of mining, power and manufacturing sector, which have been performing pretty well. As per the index of industrial production, manufacturing contribute about 77.36% of weightage. And if there is a slight improvement in the manufacturing sector, then given the weightage it has in the index, we are going to face higher industrial growth. So if you are required to understand how IIP function, pay attention. IIP function on the weightage criteria. Now, you are not required to go into the formula, but understand this. What policymakers do? They just bring the important weight given to a particular item and try to multiply it with the changes in its production in percentage terms and divide it with the weightage given to that particular item. Let's say we are talking about the car manufacturing. So what is the percentage of cars which are produced over and above the last 1 year? So let's say the car has increased by 110% or there is a 10% increase. Or let's say the car manufacturing has increased by 110% this year. And the weightage to car industry in the manufacturing, let's say, is given as 50. Now divide this by 50 and you will get your index of industrial production. Well, this is just a hypothetical example. So more weightage means more change, or if the weightage remains low but the changes in the production of a particular commodity is high, we're going to have high index of industrial production. Well, index of industrial production is published by National Statistical Office. The base year which is used in this index is 2011 and 2012. Base year is the year which is used for comparing particular commodities and its particular change over the period of time. So it is like this. What was the production of car industry in 2011? And that should be compared with the present car industries and its production. So let's say in 2010 we were producing 100 cars, but now we are producing 190 cars. So what is the increase? So there is an increase of 90. And this comparative analysis is based on the criteria of base year. The sectors which are considered under the index of industrial production include mining, manufacturing and electricity. As we have already discussed, manufacturing sector consists the highest share of production. The goods which are considered under this index are intermediate goods, capital goods, construction goods, consumer durables and consumer non-durables. Consumer durables mostly include the consumptions items or items which are for durable use. For instance, the refrigerator or the television set which you have in your households. Highest weightage is given to the primary goods and lowest goes to the capital goods. Index of 8 core industry is something which is different from index of industrial production, and this comparative analysis is also important from the perspective of prelim examination. This index is published by Office of Economic Advisor under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. This person is also responsible for maintaining the cadre of Indian Economic Services. The base year also remains the same in this category. And the 8 core sectors are coal, crude oil, natural gas, petroleum refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement and electricity. This was once asked by UPSC in its prelim examination. Highest weightage given to the petroleum product and the lowest goes to the fertilizer. With this discussion in place, now I will leave you with question of the day.